Fairmont Crest didn't explode with a gunshot or brazen scandal. It cracked open from a wound so thin people only noticed once the blood had already started to run. And that wound had a name: Alan. He came back without noise, without begging, without explanations, only to place in Leslie's hand a missing piece powerful enough to shatter the way she's always seen Eva, powerful enough to turn every coincidence into a chain of cold, deliberate design. Days erased from the record, a name misspelled on purpose, a trace only someone who once stood dangerously close to Eva would recognize. It all locks together into a seam of truth someone has been stitching shut for years. But the most terrifying question is this: did Alan bring proof to save Leslie, or to steer her straight into the trap that's been waiting all along? If Eva isn't merely lying, but was actually made by a plan, then who wrote that plan, and why does it need Leslie at her weakest to activate? Today, we're going to peel back this story layer by layer, and the deeper we go, the clearer it becomes. Fairmont Crest isn't a place that hides secrets. It's a place where secrets swallow people whole. Alan arrived like a clean, straight cut, no noise required to make it hurt, only the precision of landing in exactly the right place to crack the shell of calm Leslie had spent her entire life building. That calm had always been fragile, stitched together with compromises, with the quiet mantra that she'd survived, with nights spent lying perfectly still just to hear her own heartbeat and confirm the past was still locked inside her chest. But Alan didn't return carrying nostalgia, and he didn't return with the kind of apology men bring when they want to reclaim what they lost. He returned with the scent of danger, of things buried for too long, of damp paper, of files being reopened, of a truth sewn shut with cold thread. The most frightening part wasn't what he knew, but the way he delivered it, a composure that felt rehearsed, as if he had practiced this moment until it fit, as if he had waited for Leslie to be at her weakest before placing in her hands a shard sharp enough to slice through her faith in Eva with her own grip.
Alan didn't need to prove he was right, because what he brought stood upright as evidence on its own, an unbroken line of truth assembled from details so small an ordinary person would overlook them. Days missing from Eva's records, a name once deliberately misspelled, a trace only someone who had stood very close to Eva could recognize. And that word, close, hit Leslie like a slap, because Leslie understood that in Fairmont Crest, anyone close enough to someone for long enough could learn how to destroy them without ever lifting a knife. Leslie's first surge of rage didn't aim itself at Eva. It turned inward, viciously, because she had trusted her own sharpness, trusted that she was sober enough, clear-eyed enough to read people. She had always been proud of her instinct, seeing schemes inside handshakes, seeing falseness inside compliments, seeing power in the way someone entered a room. And yet with Eva, she had permitted herself to soften. She had let compassion step in where suspicion should have stood guard. She had told herself Eva was the kind of woman who lived by survival instinct, who grabbed opportunity the way drowning people grab a rope, sometimes ugly but real, sometimes reckless but rational. Alan offered a colder, more terrifying possibility. Eva wasn't merely lying. Eva was living inside a story that had been designed for her, a past edited the way people edit contracts, until she became the right person at the right moment for the right family and the right benefit. Leslie felt shoved out of her role as observer, like a chess piece suddenly realizing there was a hand above the board. Everything she had filed away as coincidence, accidental meetings, opportunities that arrived too easily, the way Eva slipped out of danger at the last second, reshaped itself into intentional milestones. Her anger changed form, from heat to humiliation, because humiliation is what rises when you understand you've been guided without ever noticing the leash. She clung to one point to keep from falling. Were Alan's documents real, or were they bait, built so convincingly they would make her believe she was chasing truth, while actually being dragged to a destination someone else had chosen? In Leslie's world, paper was never just paper. Paper was power. Paper was a weapon. Paper was the excuse that could erase an entire life. One page could open the gate to Fairmont Crest, or lock someone outside it forever as a nobody.
One signature could reroute accounts, warp inheritances, shift guilt onto the wrong shoulders. If these files were authentic, then who had the authority to alter records without leaving fingerprints? Hospitals, courts, registry offices, or something quieter, something cleaner? where the dirt was scrubbed away before it ever reached the people who needed to believe it was spotless. And if these files were a lure, then who was smart enough to craft a trap so refined it made Leslie feel like the hunter again while turning her into prey? Her anger flared at that second possibility because it stole her favorite posture, control. She hated that feeling more than she hated betrayal itself. Alan laid out the chain of details as if he had excavated every layer with his own hands, as if he had touched what Leslie never dared to touch. The missing days in Eva's history weren't a careless oversight. They were a hole cut with intention. In Fairmont Crest, emptiness is always a signal. Either something was too filthy to record or too valuable to risk exposing. Leslie pictured possibilities like splinters of glass, an accident buried, a lawsuit settled in silence, a large transfer of money, a secret hospitalization. Each possibility suggested a different circle of people who would benefit from deletion. The person who caused the harm, the person who bought the silence, the person who needed a newly clean human being to insert into the game. Names drifted through Leslie's mind like shadows crawling along a wall. Attorneys who cleaned up for the elite, doctors who knew how to keep their mouths shut, administrative staff trained to sign as instructed, charities that wore kindness on the outside while moving rivers of money underneath. And in all of it, Eva stood at the center like a product, packaged, positioned, delivered. The longer Leslie thought, the clearer one thing became, clear enough to make her choke on her own fury. If Eva was truly a product, then whoever made her didn't simply want her alive. They wanted her placed in exactly the right spot to do maximum damage. And that spot was Leslie's life, at exactly the moment Leslie was most vulnerable. Not vulnerable in the shallow ways people assume, money, friends, status, but vulnerable because there was a crack in her soul she had tried to seal with pride.
There were days she stood in front of the mirror, flawless on the outside, strong enough to glide into parties and boardrooms without a tremor, while inside she felt like a house hollowed out by termites, one firm knock away from collapse. Eva had arrived in that moment, not too eager to raise suspicion, not too cold to keep at a distance, but perfectly calibrated, just enough warmth to become the one person who understood Leslie when everyone else only saw the armor. And if Alan was telling the truth, then Eva hadn't found Leslie's weak point through sensitivity. She had found it because someone had handed her a map or taught her how to draw one. Leslie's anger stopped being the anger of someone fooled and became the anger of someone realizing she might have been studied as a target. Alan himself became a question standing upright in front of her. Who was he in Eva's story, really? And what did very close mean? An ex? A guardian? A partner? Someone involved in the reconstruction of Eva, from paperwork to biography. Leslie couldn't ignore the timing. Alan vanished at the right moment, and he returned at the right moment, when she was at her weakest. In Fairmont Crest, coincidence is just a polite word for conspiracy. If Alan had been pushed out of the game, then his return could be revenge. If Alan was still in the game, then his appearance was a signal. Someone had given him permission. Someone wanted Leslie to see only a portion of the truth, the portion that would trigger the reaction they needed. His calm unsettled her more than any threat. People are calm only when they hold the advantage, or when they have nothing left to lose. Alan didn't look like a man who had lost everything. He looked like a man who had been waiting. Leslie walked back through her memories of Eva, as if moving down the hallway where every painting might be forged. Smiles that once felt warm now looked like masks. Comfort that once felt gentle now looked like hooks. She remembered Eva appearing like a savior and disappearing at exactly the right time, as if she had only come to place one brick and then step away. She remembered the way Eva dodged certain questions, yet answered other questions too smoothly, like someone who had rehearsed the lines.
She remembered the small slips, a word too old-fashioned for the poor past Eva claimed, a reaction too fast to a distant name, an eerie certainty about whom to call at the hospital to handle things quickly, as if she had done it many times before. Before, Leslie had labeled that intelligence. Now, Leslie labeled it residue. Her anger gained a sharper outline, rage at being used as a bridge. In Fairmont Crest, everyone uses everyone, but usually with an unspoken agreement, a mutual awareness of the transaction. Leslie had always told herself she wasn't naive. She understood the rules. If she softened, it was because she chose to, not because someone guided her. But if Eva had been placed in Leslie's life to lead her toward a predetermined end, then every choice Leslie believed was hers turned suspicious. She began to distrust even the decisions she had once worn like trophies. She remembered changing her stance at the last minute in a matter that had mattered, after Eva had said something that sounded, She remembered trusting someone she shouldn't have because Eva insisted they weren't dangerous. She remembered leaving a file unopened because Eva called it old. Her anger turned its teeth on her because it carried the realization that she might have betrayed herself without ever noticing. And then fear changed shape. Leslie stopped fearing a simple betrayal from Eva. She started fearing that from day one she had been part of the plan, a component Eva or the hand behind Eva had calculated carefully. She feared the people around her were no longer people, but roles arranged on a stage. She feared that if she chased the truth, what would block her wouldn't be the obvious machinery, law, police, hospitals, but flesh and blood, family, friends, the very people she once assumed were on her side. In Fairmont Crest, systems and people are not separate. Systems are people with power, and people with power build systems in their own image. Leslie knew that one wrong question could earn her a label: unstable, paranoid, hysterical. One wrong accusation could trigger a concerned intervention, an evaluation, a recommendation to rest, a gentle removal of her access to information. She had seen it done to others. She had never imagined it could be done to her. So, she began to calculate like someone backed into a corner. If Alan had brought this secret to save her, why didn't he bring all of it?
If he had brought it to force her to activate the final stage of the plan, what exactly did he need her to do? She imagined one scenario. She storms into an investigation, makes noise, forces Eva to react, and in the reaction, something larger slips into daylight. But who benefits from the larger secret surfacing? Alan, if he wants Eva destroyed? The hand behind Eva if they want Leslie to become the sacrifice that distracts from the real target? Another power in Fairmont Crest waiting for the right moment to topple a family or a fortune, using Eva's scandal like a bomb. Leslie saw herself standing inside overlapping currents of interest, like a body in the middle of an intersection where every vehicle is accelerating and everyone is willing to run her down if she stands in the wrong lane. Her anger no longer exploded. It burned low and steady, the kind that can become cruelty. She wanted to punish Eva, but she also wanted to punish whoever had turned Eva into a tool. And even deeper, she wanted to punish herself for letting trust become weakness. Leslie understood that if she attacked Eva head-on, Eva could deny, cry, play the victim, and in this world the victim is often the most effective weapon of all. If she attacked Alan head-on, Alan could smirk, feed her more bait, and keep her lost. Leslie needed another anchor, proof that could not be bent, but proof in Fairmont Crest is always bent. The only question is by whom, which made the most important question shift, not what Eva had done, but who had the power to alter her records without leaving a trace, and where that person stood inside the network. A doctor who accepted donations from a powerful family, a lawyer who specialized in cleaning messes, a clerk bought into obedience, a shadow organization hiding behind the soft mask of charity. Leslie began to recall the wrong details she once ignored because she wanted to believe. A place Eva mentioned that she shouldn't have known. A sharp reaction to news about an old accident in Fairmont Crest, as if it wasn't just a headline but a memory. A half sentence about a secret hospitalization that Eva swallowed instantly, like someone who realized she'd slipped. Those missing days in Eva's records could match any event like that. If it was an accident, who got hurt, and who was protected? If it was a lawsuit, who had to lose without being allowed to lose? If it was money, who paid for silence?
If it was a hospitalization, which clinic was private enough and which doctor loyal enough? Every question opened a road, and Leslie understood that every road could trigger a trap. Then a thought iced her spine. If Eva was a designed story, then Eva might not be the only one. Fairmont Crest could be full of perfect fits, manufactured to slip into the right families, the right companies, the right legacies. Leslie began to see the neighborhood as a vast stage, where the audience thinks it's watching real life, while a director moves in the dark behind the curtains. Who was that director? One powerful individual? A group? An organization? Or perhaps the families who believed they were victims were also writing scripts for one another. Leslie wanted to believe she had only wandered into Eva's deception. Her instincts told her it was bigger, and Eva was simply the easiest piece to notice. Her rage rerouted into vigilance. From the moment Alan arrived, every movement she made might already be watched. If she called someone, someone might be listening. If she requested a file, the file might be edited before it reached her hands. If she met someone, someone might record it. An invisible ring tightened, not through force, but through the sensation that she no longer had the freedom to be wrong. Leslie hated that sensation because it pushed her into the role they wanted, calm, unreactive, incurious. But inside, she felt like fire trapped in glass. The tighter it was sealed, the hotter it became. Another fight erupted in her mind. Should she tell anyone? Should she confide in someone she believed would stand with her? Or was that exactly what the hand behind this wanted? To let the news spread in a shape they could control. If she stayed silent, she could gather more, but she also gave the enemy time to erase. If she acted immediately, she might be crushed before she even understood who she was fighting. Leslie realized the most dangerous weapon in this game wasn't Eva, and it wasn't Alan. It was timing. Whoever controlled timing controlled the outcome. Alan had chosen this moment to return, so who had chosen it for him? She tried to look at Alan with the cold eyes she used for business. He didn't demand her faith, but he didn't need it. He only needed doubt, because doubt is a seed that grows on its own. Alan felt like a man holding a match, not burning down a house, simply placing the flame where the wind is strongest.
Leslie didn't know what Alan wanted, but she began to guess. Maybe he wanted Eva destroyed, using Leslie as the hammer. Maybe he wanted revenge against a family in Fairmont Crest, and Eva was the key. Maybe he truly wanted to save someone from Eva. But if so, why choose Leslie, the one already too deep inside the game? Or maybe Alan was another piece moved into position, brought to make Leslie open a door she would never have opened unless someone forced her hand. Hypotheses collided in her skull like knuckles against glass, sharpening her anger into something dangerous. The more cornered she felt, the more her instincts tilted toward uglier reactions. Not tears, not panic, but ruthlessness. She considered weaponizing what Fairmont Crest feared most, humiliation. She imagined setting a trap for Eva, forcing her to reveal herself. She imagined approaching the people who could have altered the records. She imagined using money, contacts, old debts, anything that could pry open locked doors. But every door had a price. Every opened lock created a new obligation. And in Fairmont Crest, debts are never just money. They become power, dependence, a slow loop of rope around your throat. She couldn't ignore another bitter possibility. If Eva had backing, that hand might be standing very close to Leslie. Someone who had sat at her table, smiled at her, spoken her name with practiced warmth. The thought made her nauseated with rage and disgust. She started examining every relationship the way you examine a stain on a white dress. Some people suddenly felt too quiet. Some people suddenly felt too eager. Invitations to dinner started to smell like probing. Leslie slipped into the state she despised most, distrusting everyone. But she also knew that in this game, distrust wasn't an illness, it was a survival reflex. And then, as she thought deeper, she met a possibility even more terrifying than Eva being the mastermind. Eva might only be following orders. The one who wrote the plan might be the one who truly wanted Leslie. That person might be settling an old score Leslie believed was erased. They might want to use Eva to drag Leslie into a legal nightmare, a scandal, an inheritance war, a power play she would lose if she didn't know the rules. Eva had always known how to touch other people's pain. So what was Leslie's pain? Fear of abandonment, guilt sealed under glamour, the hunger to be recognized.
Or a secret Leslie buried so deep she lived every day afraid of the shovel. If the writer of the plan knew that wound, they only needed someone like Eva to press the right spot at the right moment. Leslie stood at the junction between truth and control. If she chased truth, she might free herself or walk straight into the trap. If she confronted Eva, she might rip off the mask or turn Eva into a martyr in other people's eyes. If she trusted Alan, she might gain an ally or a guide leading her over a cliff. If she refused him, she might preserve her autonomy or miss the only chance to see the game from behind the curtain. Her anger became fuel, and fuel can save you or burn you down. Leslie understood she had reached the kind of moment where every choice was hard because no option was clean. Every path had blood on it, only the owner of the blood would change. When night fell over Fairmont Crest and the lights in the mansions blinked on like eyes, Leslie felt watched by something she couldn't name. She replayed every hint Alan dropped, every gap in the record, every misspelled name. She tried to match them to events she knew inside this community. But the more she connected the dots, the more the lines led toward places she didn't want to enter. Hospitals, courts, charity funds, private meetings, parties where destinies were traded behind perfect smiles. One truth hardened in her mind. If she asked the wrong person the wrong question, she would be stopped. And the stopping wouldn't arrive as violence. It would arrive as polite brutality, advice to rest, threats of lawsuits, reminders of reputation, a soft suggestion that she was stressed and imagining. They wouldn't hit her, they would make her doubt themselves. But Leslie wasn't easy to break. Her anger, if controlled, could become a blade. In that silence, she began to picture her counterstrike, not charging at the truth like someone desperate, but using truth as bait, forcing other people to expose themselves. She imagined creating a situation where Eva would have to choose between two stories, and in the act of choosing, reveal the crack. She imagined finding a witness for the missing days, someone outside the system and outside the circle of people who could be bought. She imagined following money, because money tells the truth more often than human mouths do. But every plan required time, and time was the one thing she didn't know she had.
Because if Alan returned at her weakest, someone had to know she was weak. And if they knew, then they also knew she would fight back. In the end, the thought that unsettled Leslie most was the cruelest one. The moment she believed she had finally awakened might be the very moment she was being guided into the ending already written for her. If Alan brought the secret to save her, why deliver it in a way that made her spiral rather than steady? If he brought it to force her to activate the final stage, then what was that final stage? Eva exposed and expelled, or Leslie shattered and replaced? Or worse, Leslie cornered into dirtying her own hands to protect her name, until she became a puppet easier to steer. Leslie had made small compromises to survive. She had never wanted to commit a grand evil just to remain standing. But Fairmont Crest didn't care what she wanted. It only cared whether she was useful. And the questions lined up like silhouettes in the dark, waiting to be called by name. Was Alan's evidence real, or was it a perfect trap designed to send Leslie running? Who had the power to alter Eva's record without leaving a mark, and who were they protecting? Which event did those missing days align with, and which powerful family in Fairmont Crest did that event touch? How close had Alan truly been to Eva, and why did he disappear at the exact moment, only to return at the exact moment? Who gave Alan the green light? Did Eva know exactly how Leslie would react, or was the hand behind Eva the one calculating every step Leslie would take? And the single question that made Leslie both furious and afraid, if the game had already closed its doors, was Eva really the one holding the key, or was there an unseen hand using Eva to hold it on their behalf? Leslie felt herself standing on the edge of something larger than truth, and one more step would tell her whether she was the hunter or the prey. Yet that same step might collapse everything she had built, until the only one left standing would be the person who wrote the plan from the very beginning.